A very warm welcome, art lovers, to the art vlog with me, George Dopamine, here from the lovely Sussex city of Chichester, where I'm here to bring you an exhibition by the Welsh wonder Gwen John, entitled Gwen John, Art and Life in Paris and London. Gwen John was traditionally squashed by two men, her brother Augustus, who enjoyed a bigger reputation in her lifetime, and her lover, the French sculptor Rodin. However, since the 1980s, Gwen John's star has risen, whereas her brother Augustus's has faded, to the point where today she's no longer a kind of undiscovered artist. Having said that, this is the first exhibition in the UK, major exhibition by her in 20 years, so I'm very much looking forward to exploring it with you. If you're a fan of Gwen John, please do post in the comments. And I thought it'd be interesting to dig out a press cutting from an exhibition I visited called Augustus John and Gwen John back in 2005 at Tate Britain. Of Augustus John, it said he ate, drank and rollicked on an epic scale. She sometimes starved alone in her room. And I have to say, that is the image I have of Gwen John in lots of ways, as a painter of the interior, of a lonely artist in a way, of an introvert who needed solitude to pursue her art. Anyway, I would think it's fair to say I'm a fan, so yeah, I can't wait to see what this exhibition has in store. It's a long one. It's going on all the way till the 8th of October. It's £14 to get in, full adult price, and there are the usual range of discounts. And I have to say, the Pallant House Gallery, where this exhibition is taking place, is one of the most important galleries in the southeast outside of London. It is absolutely fantastic. Let's go and visit. And here is the wonderful Pallant House Gallery. I have many happy memories here over the years of seeing great shows, usually by British artists. It has very much a modern British focus, and it's in this area of Chichester called the Pallant. It has this old house, which is the core of the gallery, which contains a wonderful permanent collection of modern British art, and then this more modern extension over here. The show sets its stall out early in the introductory room. The curator, Dr. Alicia Foster, intends to show us that my view of John as a solitary artist creating alone is wrong. She interacted with many of the great figures of the age, Whistler, Rodin, Rilke, as well as being incredibly engaged with the art around, admiring, for example, Cézanne. Yet straight away in the first painting, we see a classic John subject matter, a solitary woman. We also see John's controlled brushstrokes. It's like a Henry James novel. Every brushstroke is meant and carefully considered. This is the opposite of a free-flowing artist, and that control is one of Gwen John's great strengths. The room London to Paris is fascinating, not because it's packed full of masterpieces, but because it gets to work putting Gwen John into context. It reminds us that she grew up in Tenby, southwest Wales, and that her move to the Slade in London a year after her brother Augustus must have been a dramatic contrast. It was a progressive art school and allowed women in the life room. The students were encouraged to develop a really detailed knowledge of the anatomy. John made friendships with lesser female artists such as Ida Nettleship and Monsell, and she stayed in lodgings with her brother Augustus in a boarding house and was very much part of the bohemian London milieu. The room also includes a wonderful contrast between Gwen and her brother.
were invited to compare the representations of Dorelia McNeill by Gwen and Augustus John. Dorelia was a friend and travelling companion of Gwen, and a lover and life companion of Augustus, as well as mother of his children. Augustus became infatuated with her and started an affair with Dorelia while still married to Isla Nettleship. But it was really interesting actually to see Gwen John's portraits of her. This one that's just about to come up now of her at Toulouse was after they'd walked there as intrepid travellers on foot. And for me, the painting on the left by Gwen John is a more honest and less dramatic and superficial surface painting, if you like, than Augustus John's representation, although they're both fine pieces of art. Gwen John studied in Paris under Whistler and fell in love with the city, and we see Whistler's influence in John's style throughout the rest of her life. He insisted on planning the palette completely before starting to paint and considered tonality above everything else. Something we see in John's work and is explained to sort of tightly controlled brushstrokes. Walter Sickert also trained at the Slade and then on to study under Whistler, so followed a similar path to John. And it's interesting that John was also respected as a teacher, as this still life shows, by somebody who studied under her. John remained in Paris while Augustus and Dorelia returned to London, and she earned money modelling, including for the most famous sculptor in Western art at that time, Rodin, and she became Rodin's lover. This painting, one of my favourites in the show, which is just coming up, shows her holding a letter which may well have been for Rodin. This room, though, is all about Gwen John finding her artistic voice and developing an intense interest in painting the interior. The exhibition points out this had become a very fashionable subject in the early 20th century, with artists such as Vuillard, who you can see here, and Bonnard, exhibiting as part of a group of interior painters in Paris in 1905. We also see a work which is going to be coming up by Hammershøi, and this link's a tiny bit tenuous. Was John aware of this artist or not? But I think what's really clear is that John simply shines in this company. There is such a highly charged intensity to these paintings, and we're lifted to Peak John in this section. She's showing us a world she very much wants us to see and take note of. In 1911, Gwen John moved to the Parisian suburb of Meudon, where Rodin also had a home, but she kept a room in Paris and commuted there to work and to engage with the Parisian art scene. She remained in Paris throughout World War I, and the exhibition argues that her art was massively affected by this. The muted tones and stripping back to bare artistic essentials of the brown teapot is a reaction to her despair and Parisian dread of ongoing war. But after the war was over, the light returns, as can be seen in the Japanese doll, flooded with light, And we also get to see examples of her convalescent series, which are both personal paintings and also a metaphor for the recovery of her much loved adopted country of France. But the exhibition reminds us of the relationship that John continued to have with the cultural world of Paris. For example, her friendship with the poet Rilke, and this book was one of her personal copies, as well as this rather wonderful notebook from Bon Marché, a department store in Paris that she absolutely loved frequenting. Gwen John converted to Catholicism in 1913. And some of her most admired paintings are of the nuns of the local order in Meudon. The synergy between a uniform habit and vibrant, distinctive personalities beyond make these some of her most beloved works. And they're incredibly modern works as well. She was influenced by the French Catholic painter Maurice Denis, who said that artists didn't have to go back to traditional forms, they could experiment to express their faith. And we see this very strongly in this last room before, as you'll see in a minute, looking at some of her floral paintings, which was a theme which began to preoccupy her in her last years. Gwen John died in 1939 on a visit to Dieppe in northern France.
So I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek inside Gwen John Life and Art in Paris and London here at the Pallant House Gallery. And I have to say, this cafe in this walled garden is one of my favourite spots in the UK art scene to have a nice cup of tea. And I've also had the stickiest, syrupiest, date-filled flapjack I think I've had. Absolutely delicious if you just have a look here, and it's very secluded. I think first of all I'd say that the title is accurate. This is about Gwen John and her world, our life and our art and life in Paris and London. So one of the criticisms I've read, I don't often read reviews, but I have done of this one, is that it kind of devalues Gwen John and brings in some very tenuous connections between different artists and Gwen John. But for me, I found actually that all of the works provided context, even some of the ones that were kind of a bit tenuous. So don't let that put you off. Gwen John is still the star here, but I found it really useful to see the link she had with the artistic world, and also just to clarify that this is still full of Gwen John's classics. There are many of her wonderful portraits, many of her wonderful Vermeer-esque interior scenes, but I enjoyed it. I love being in her world. I think, as an introvert myself, sometimes I find her, despite the fact that the exhibition was busting this myth, I think her paintings are paintings for introverts, even if the life she led was much less so. So I really did enjoy it a lot. And I would give it an 8 out of 10 overall. But if you've been to the Gwen John show here at Pallant House, or you've enjoyed looking at the review, do post in the comments if you agree with me or not. So overall, this exhibition is on all the way until the 8th of October 2023. I think £14 is good value, and you must remember you get access to the whole of this wonderful gallery here at Pallant House, which has one of the most important collections of modern British art. And it's constantly updating and refreshing. And there are other exhibitions as well here. The Gwen John one is a big one, but there are other smaller ones which you'll be able to peek inside as well. So do remember to subscribe to the art vlog, hit that notification bell for reviews of upcoming exhibitions across London, the South East and beyond. We're having a little bit of a moment outside of London because I've covered so many exhibitions there recently. We'll be back there towards the start of July.